Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Inkster. I'm the director of the Elizabeth D. Rockwell Center on Ethics and Leadership at the Hobby School of Public Affairs. The center is very excited to sponsor tonight's panel on justice, law, politics, and the LGBTQ plus community. The lives of LGBTQ plus people have changed markedly over the last 40 and 50 years as they have gained more opportunities and greater recognition. Discrimination and barriers nonetheless still exist. And as recent political events demonstrate, there's always a possibility for regress. Tonight's panel features 3 individuals who have lived these changes and led the way toward effecting positive changes. My co-organizer for this event, William Marsh, will introduce our panelists in just a minute. But first, I want to briefly lay out the format for tonight's panel. Let me pause here, though, to say thank you to our panelists for being here, for giving so generously of your time. And also just to express how glad I'm here. As I was just saying off camera, I'm very excited about tonight's panel. So for the format tonight, each of our panelists will speak for roughly 20 minutes or so, and we'll then have 30 minutes or so at the end of the 3 presentations for questions and answers and discussion. For you in the audience, if you want to ask a question, you'll enter your questions through the chat function. If you're unfamiliar with the chat function, it's the bottom. It should be in the center of the screen. Just click on it. A little box will come up. You can type in a question and then just hit return, and it'll come to me, and then I can ask the question of the panelists. My co-organizer for this event, William Marsh, is a Master of Public Policy student at the Hobby School of Public Affairs and has long been an advocate for LGBTQ rights. He originally proposed tonight's panel, has played a central role in organizing it. So I want to thank him for all of his help with this organization of this event, and now turn things over so that he can introduce our panelists. Thanks, William.
Thank you, Professor Inkster. So good evening, everybody. Tonight, we have the good fortune to be joined by 3 pioneers in the ongoing fight for LGBTQ rights, representation, and leadership in the fields of justice and public policy. They're here with us to share their stories, pass on their wisdom, and to allow us to pick their brains about some of the most important problems facing society today. First up, we have former Houston Mayor Annise Parker, who also served as city controller, at-large city council member, and was one of the first openly LGBTQ plus mayors of a major city in the United States. Her history of public service stretches back decades, most notably to her 1997 victory in a runoff race for at-large position 1, making her the first openly gay elected official in Houston's history. Justice Charles Spain of the Texas 14th Court of Appeals is the first openly LGBTQ plus appellate judge in Texas. And prior to being elected to his current position, Justice Spain was Judge Spain and was appointed to an associate municipal court by then Mayor Annise Parker. He's a proud Eagle Scout, scouter, father, and mentor to many would-be and current LGBTQ plus allies and activists in a variety of areas ranging from scouting to policy. Finally, Judge Phyllis R. Frye, who's currently an associate judge for the City of Houston Municipal Courts and was appointed to that position also by then Mayor Annise Parker, making her the first open trans person to occupy a bench in the entire United States of America. As an Eagle Scout and a veteran of the United States Army, Judge Frye prepared for life in the trenches and has rarely left them since, championing justice and equality from the front lines for more than 40 years. I'd like to personally echo Professor Inkster's thanks to all of our participants for giving of their time and experience, and to thank Dr. Inkster in turn for making this evening possible. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Mayor Annise Parker.
Well, thank you, and happy to be with everyone tonight, and always pleased to share the screen and some the conversation with Justice Spain and Judge Frye. Let me hasten to say that I am not a lawyer, don't pretend to be one, and have taken a somewhat different route than my 2 colleagues here in terms of activism, but there's been a lot of overlap as well. And while I'm going to talk a little bit about my path through politics, I hope that we can get to enough time to actually deal with some of the larger issues of things that are happening today, and some of the tremendous changes that are happening around the across the globe in terms of LGBT issues. But let me start first with what I am doing now. And that is that I'm the president and CEO of LGBT Victory Fund and Victory Institute. Go to our website, victoryfund.org or victoryinstitute.org, where there are two 30-year-old organizations, one organization, two halves, that has been devoted to helping LGBT leaders achieve public office. And we're the only national organization that works solely with LGBTQ candidates. We're the only national organization that works politics at every level of the ballot. It's kind of a running joke within the organization that in the same year that we helped elect a mosquito control board member in South Florida, we also helped Pete Buttigieg win a presidential primary and everything in between. Our bread and butter work is really at the state house level. And that's certainly where a lot of the action is these days in terms of our community and what's happening legislatively. I came to Victory after I left the mayor's office because it took me a long time to figure out what I could do to continue to be involved in politics and the kind of work that I love after I left what I consider to be the best job anybody could possibly have, which was to be mayor of my hometown. And it was a hard transition, but Victory allows me to work with candidates all over the country who are taking their first steps into politics, help them navigate the process and hopefully come out successfully on the other end. There are almost 1,000 out LGBT candidates who are holding office as we speak. And in fact, we just elected 2 out trans candidates last night in Illinois. Very excited about that. There are 36 out trans candidates in the United States out of that 1,000. But the sad news is that if we're, as the latest Gallup polls say, we're more than 5% of the population, and there's 1,000 elected officials, when you consider how many public positions there are across the United States, elected positions, we'd have to elect 23,000 more people to achieve parity. So I think I have a little bit of job security and can continue to work on this for a while. But backing up, I started my entry into politics in the early 70s. And in fact, I met Judge Frye. All right, I first saw Judge Frye in 1976, but I attended my first LGBT organizing event in 1975. I'm not old enough for Stonewall, which was 1969. I was a little too young, but I was around and as aware as I could be as a young lesbian of the things that were happening around me. And I got involved in the movement as quickly as I could when I came to Rice to go to college. I want to give everybody who's watching this a sense of the profound difference of organizing today and organizing in the 70s. And yes, it was a very different time, and the pressures were different, and the threats were different and very real. But the most profound difference is how isolated we were. We were all on our own little islands, desperately trying to find other people like ourselves. Now, all I have to do is, turn on my smartphone, and I can be connected to LGBTQI people around the globe. But there were no cell phones, there was no internet, there was no social media in the 70s and 80s when I did most of my activism. And even though the LGBT rights movement didn't start at Stonewall, it entered a new phase at Stonewall. And there had been organizations prior to Stonewall, but there was no connection. There wasn't a U.S. LGBT rights movement or a global rights movement. There were localized efforts to try to bring sense and sanity and to try to make change. And the hardest part first was finding each other where we were, and then trying to connect to other people who were doing the same work and to learn and support each other, so we weren't constantly reinventing the wheel. But yes, we were constantly reinventing the wheel. That and the early the movement that I entered in the 70s was very male, and we didn't have the alphabet soup. It was the gay rights movement, and I was fortunate enough as a young rights student to be connected to a group of older lesbian feminists who had been schooled and grew up in the women's movement, but were also active in the nascent gay movement. And I was a mascot. I wasn't a leader. I wasn't an organizer. I wasn't an opinion maker. I was a mascot. I get to go places and see things happen, watch history being made, watch the future happen. And I could see myself reflected in them. And I think that's one of the most important things that if you can't see what is possible, it's hard to see yourself there. And for me, being able to watch and learn and grow as a part of this effort until I could finally take my own place as part of the change movement was really important. While I was at Rice, there was a very small lesbian organization that started in about 1976 that I was a part of. And then the year after I graduated, I was one of the founding members of the Rice University student group. It was the Rice Gay and Lesbian Student Support Group. There was one at UT, there was one at University of Houston. I don't know that there was another one in the state of Texas. And it's not that, Rice was a particularly liberal or forward thinking or politically connected university, but there was a core of us who believed that we needed for ourselves to be a part of the movement and to have a support network on campus. And if it wasn't going to happen unless we created it. And I will absolutely say that my success in politics later on started at Rice, because I learned how to do public speaking as part of the Rice Gay and Lesbian Student Support Group, because most of what we did, we were very focused on the university, was speak to our peers. And so we got to speak to every, the sociology of deviance and the criminology classes and all the things you didn't want to be a part of, but that the professors invited us in, and I could talk about something I knew, which was what the gay experience was for me at Rice. And that if I could talk about what I knew, I could stand up in front of an audience and engage. And I did it over and over and over again for a number of years. I was the contact for several years as an alum for the organization, and truly being able to address my peers was an important part of developing me in terms of the public activism. First 10 years after I left Rice, well, actually, I left Rice and went to work in the oil industry because that was 80% of the Houston economy, and that's what you did in Houston in the mid to late 70s. But I spent the next 10 years being Miss Gay and Lesbian, everything I could find. And then I left that and became Miss civic association, everything I could find, because, you know, you get a little older, you buy a house, you decide you need to invest in community. But the lessons were that there's always something that needs to be fixed. And if no one else is going to do it, I could raise my hand and do it. And kept doing and decided, oh, you know, so many of the things that I'm passionate about have to do with the city of Houston or get stymied by the city of Houston. I'm going to run for city council. And I ran for city council and I lost. And I ran for city council again and I lost. And I could spend some time talking about those races. But I will say I curled up into a fetal position after each race. It took me a while to get up off the couch and decide I wanted to do it again, because the experience of losing was horrible and the experience of campaigning was almost as bad. But the goal was still there and the job still beckoned. And even, and what I finally came to understand is that I worked for 20 years in the oil industry and I had a good job, and it was a great career, but I was working to support my volunteer habit, and all of my passions were with the community organizing and the work to try to make Houston a better place. And so decided I was going to do it one more time. If I failed at my opportunity to get elected, I was just going to go off and never do it again, just help other people get elected. But fortunately, the third time worked, and then 9 successful campaigns citywide in Houston. Too many of us jump into something hard and stub our toe and stop and start over again. And I think you're going to find that the 3 of us on this call, all of us have tackled hard things and we just kept going. And if one path was blocked, we found another way to move forward. And it's a constant effort for me. It's always about next. What I've worked on, what I'm proud of, I've achieved something. We've elected somebody, we've passed a bill, we've passed an ordinance, we've done something, but there's always something else coming. One of the questions just came up about solidarity. Was there more solidarity and community activism then as now? There's still lots of grassroots level or activism and solidarity. What is different now is that we can find each other, but also I think there's some difference in that those of us, there were few of us, and we were isolated from other activists who were in the same space and trying to do what we were doing. But we were very much isolated from, I won't say that there was a broader LGBT community, because everybody else was afraid of us. Those of us who are out, and I think, you know, and I know that Judge Frye's had this experience too, is that if you're out agitating for change, and if you're visible, people would walk on the other side of the street if they'd see me coming, because they were afraid that I would say hello to them and someone would know that they were LGBT. That kind of thing doesn't happen anymore. But it's a little bit, it's very different now in that there's so many ways to be involved, and there's so much happening. There are so many types of LGBT community, I guess I should say. And it's back then, you know, we were all introduced as pioneers. Pioneers, you're off in the wilderness mostly by yourself. I'm not by myself anymore, and I'm glad. But the other thing is about being a pioneer is you blaze the trail, and you want more and more people to follow you, to follow that trail. And so for all of us, we've been able to blaze the trail, and, you know, it's okay to be the first. You never want to be the last. And it's exciting for me right now to have come really full circle from my activist days in the 70s. And now I consider myself a LGBT rights activist again, because of the work I'm doing and bringing people into the process. And I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about the kind of thing that I'm doing. And one of the criticisms that I hear a lot in my 3 years at Victory, primarily from the right, but Victory is a nonpartisan organization, and I will say there's the right, and then there's the lunatic fringe, and I get hearing a lot about identity politics and the futility of identity politics, and that we somehow want to be supported, or I'm working to elect people, and it's simply because they're LGBT. And the answer to that is that, well, there's multiple answers to that, but one is that if you look at what's happening in legislatures across the country right now, trans youth are in the bullseye. And, bans on sports participation, access to bathrooms, bans on appropriate medical treatment for trans youth. If you are not in the room as part of the conversation, you're being talked about, you're not being talked with. My identity matters. Trans identity matters. Our democracy is stronger and more robust when all of us are represented, but when our own daily lives are being discussed and legislated and litigated, it is imperative that we are part of the conversation and have the ability to engage. The other thing I hear when I'm not hearing all about, identity politics, is that more and more young people tell me, well, I'm not interested in politics at all, that politicians are corrupt, politics is ineffective. And I'm going to tell you that a march is a moment in time. A movement can actually push change, but that movement stops at the council chamber door or the courthouse door or the halls of the legislature. You have to have people inside those chambers, inside those rooms, who write the laws, who put the words down on paper, who actually change that momentum of the movement into the laws that govern our society. And we have to be a part of the conversation. And if you're not part of politics, it doesn't mean that it won't happen. It just means that you won't be in the room to be a part of making the change that needs to be made so that you are included. With my eye on the clock, I'm gonna stop there and pass it off to Justice Main. I really look forward to conversations about all of these issues. There you go.
After a gazillion Zoom oral arguments, I should know better than this, but that's what young people are good for, is to tell you these things. So this will be the rights person number 2. I'll admit to being a nerd. I'm not necessarily going to call that to Annise. You'll get the Aggie last, and so we'll have the tripartite here.
As is appropriate.
Yes. So along the vein of being the nerd, Annise basically was quoting Pericles when he said, just because you're not interested in politics does not mean politics is not interested in you. And Ann Richards said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So it is terribly important, in my opinion, that you need to be who you are if you're going to be an activist, if you're going to be a politician, if you're going to be involved in government in some form. But I think you need to figure out who you are and work some of that out before you throw yourself in front of the public. Because as the mayor alluded to, elections Losing an election, in my opinion, is the closest thing to the death of a close family member or a personal friend that you can come to. You go from 150 miles an hour if you worked hard. Some people don't work hard in elections, and I don't have a lot of respect for them. But if you work hard in an election and you lose, and you find out 15 minutes after the polls close, when the early voting comes back, and you can't even get back home, you feel like a death sentence has been put over you, and that's harsh. And that was me in 2010. So when the mayor speaks about that, I know exactly what she's talking about. She was campaigning for mayor at the same time I was running for district judge, and our paths crossed a bunch. We knew each other, but it crossed a bunch. That was a miserable evening. And so you do these things and you put yourself out there, and it doesn't work out. And then you go and decide, what are you going to do about that? Well, let me digress a bit. I'm a justice on the 14th Court of Appeals, which is one of the 14 state courts of appeals in Texas. We handle appeals from trial courts. We do everything but murder cases in which the death penalty has been assessed. As a result of being a judge, there's a lot of things I can't talk about because of the Code of Judicial Conduct. But I will, there are plenty of things I can say, and most of those are going to be a personal story, because I think it's important, if you are in politics, regardless of the group. I don't care if it's the politics of the Boy Scouts of America or the politics of your civic association or running for elected office. I do think you have to go and put yourself out there. So I would say, I'll start with my theory that you need to know the role that you want to be in. The mayor and I probably are the good citizen role. And there are other roles in politics where you throw a Molotov cocktail. And I think, there's problems with that from a legal standpoint if you actually set something on fire. But if you are an agitator, I can tell you that the good citizens can't succeed without the agitators. And if you want to get involved in politics, understand what you're good at. Understand that other people are good at their roles. And when people aren't watching, go over and tell them great job, and try to be friends with people that you can, and encourage people, because it takes a whole lot of different people to make a political movement work. And it's not just necessarily the upfront people who are going to run for the big office. There's all sorts of people like precinct chairs and people that are just mad, and that can focus that anger into something constructive. So I think you have to figure out what your role is going to be. And as someone who's attended the Alley Theater, because my parents dragged me there and made sure that I didn't talk during productions in the 1960s and 1970s, know your acting role and stick to it when you're in the public limelight. As for me, I'll give you the version of the coming out story that Judge Stephen Kirkland used to hound me mercilessly because my story sucked. And he was right. I didn't really have it all together. But sometimes I think it is important to understand when you figured out that you were gay. I was a 14-year-old Eagle Scout. And I earned my Eagle and finished in December of 1973, and probably on the young side. And I, at that time, was probably a member of the other party in terms of the way I wanted to vote. My dad was a Democrat and my mom was a member of the other party. They canceled their votes out zealously, and I probably was on mom's side at that point. But in August of 1974, something happened that really changed me. And that's because the president admitted that he lied and he resigned from office. And in today's political climate, it's probably an incredibly naive world that the president could lie and have to resign from office. But that's what happened. And I was angry because the president lied to me and I believed. I was mad, just really, 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 really mad. And incidentally, I have an 18-year-old son, and I'm tickled by his comments about the immediate past president, but that's just the difference. He's an Eagle Scout too. And sometime on a Monday in October, while I was in first period band class as a sophomore in high school, the idea popped into my head, oh, I'm gay. And that was on Monday. Somewhere the whole week was a week of just unbelievable dread. I knew I would never get married. I knew I would never have kids. I knew I could never tell my parents. I knew I could never tell any of my friends, on and on and on and on and on. Somehow, by the end of the week, I managed to figure out that I was going to have to survive high school and move on. And I did. I worked at summer camp at Camp Strake south of Conroe at the time for many years. One summer before I went to Rice, I had the summer romance with a fellow staff member who was an Eagle Scout too. Most attractive guy I'd ever seen. But by the time the summer was over, he decided when he showed up at Rice, he was going to be straight. And I have to tell you, that was kind of a crushing blow if any of you were teenagers and were rejected on such a level like that. And I really didn't do anything for a long time. I just decided to crawl back in my little hole at Rice and didn't participate in the gay student organization. And I just kind of dog paddled, which for me means I'm alive because AIDS was going on at the time and none of us knew it. I ended up going to work for the Boy Scouts after I graduated from Rice because Rice convinced me I didn't want to be in a classroom anymore for a while. I was totally sick of that. And I went to work for the Boy Scouts in Dallas. When I first showed up there, I was told that the reason that I had a job, there was a job opening, was because one of the professional scouters had been murdered because he was gay, and he picked up a date at one of the parks in Dallas who went home and murdered him. And but they said, that's how you got your job. So I don't know, that didn't incline me to want to talk a whole lot about who I was. That was pretty harsh. I went to Baylor Law School, and at Baylor Law School, I think enough was enough. I remember when Bowers versus Hardwick came down in 1986, and I walked into family law class, and I told everybody in a big classroom that the United States Supreme Court just handed down the second worst opinion in the history of the court, and told people what it was and went and sat down. Nobody in that classroom knew I was gay. And I didn't say I was gay, but they were probably going like, that was weird. And I then joined the Waco Lambda student organization, which is the first, to our knowledge, lesbian and gay Waco area student group. And it was very clandestine because we knew what would happen. And that was exciting. It was exciting because we got caught. We would all go to Pat and F and get in trouble and maybe expelled from school. And I met some amazing people who were willing to put their degrees on the line. And in the summer of 1987, in May of 1987, I went with two other members of that group to the third annual Lesbian Gay Organizing Conference that I think Glenn Maxey put on. And it was at Texas Tech University. It was the same weekend as the law school. It was at the law school, the same weekend as their graduation. And they had big signs that said, "Welcome Texas gay and lesbian community activists," which I think probably confused the hell out of a lot of the moms and dads who were there at Texas Tech Law School to watch their sons and daughters graduate. And at that meeting, I met one of the scariest people that I've ever met in my entire life, and that's Phyllis Frye. And Phyllis at that time was wearing hats, and I don't know what kind of a conversation I had with Phyllis, but I can tell you I was a 20-something white boy, Eagle Scout who was going to Baylor, and here I was talking to Phyllis, and I was just way out of my comfort zone, just way out of my comfort zone. And it's probably one of the best meetings I've ever had in my entire life. Here I am in the Panhandle, and just pushing you out in the middle of the pool. And I honestly don't know the next time I met Phyllis, but I slowly but surely have become close personal friends with Phyllis. And from that point on, I'll fast forward quickly. I worked at the Texas Supreme Court, the Austin Court of Appeals, private practice and for 18 years for the First Court of Appeals in Houston. I joined the Stonewall, what's now the Stonewall Law Association of Greater Houston, the Gay and Lesbian now Plus group. Once I moved back to Houston in 1994 and helped found the State Bar LGBT law section of the State Bar of Texas, which is the first in the nation of any queer section of a bar that you have to belong to legally practice law in the United States. It's true that the New York bar, San Francisco bar, they had groups of lawyers in those towns, but nobody had one that was part of a mandatory bar. And I was one of the 5 people that founded that group. Judge Frye was another one of them. And we had our own little story on that. They told us no at first. We lost by 2 votes. They all told us it wasn't because it was prejudice. They told us that we should join some other group, a group that told us we should form our own section, incidentally, and say, y'all go do your own thing. We support you, but y'all need to go do your own thing. And when we were done with that, this was in an executive board meeting at the State Bar of Texas. The federal district judge that was on the State Bar Board, because they always have a federal district judge, Norman Black, came outside after everybody else had come and told us, we're not prejudiced, we really appreciate you. Y'all go work with this other thing. Thank you very much for playing our game. And he said, all those people that came and talked to you, he said, that's a bunch of crap. He said, that was prejudice. He said, I want you to keep fighting. He probably didn't say crap. He was much more of a gentleman than that, but it was clear what he meant. He said, keep fighting. And he just said, don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. And he went back and he told the State Bar Executive Board that I've always been proud to be a member of this group, but I'm not proud today. And he said it to the Texas Lawyer, which was a paper magazine back in the days when there were more paper magazines than there are today. It made the front page news. And then the next time we came back and played their game and got 200 more signatures and did all the silly stuff they made us do, we won. Because they reran the story in the Texas Lawyer about Judge Black, who had passed away in the meantime. And I'll get worked up about this because we had a meeting in Houston at Connie Moore and Debbie Hunt's house. And we gave an award to Judge Brown, and he came and said, this is all very kind of you, but I didn't do anything. He said, I worked on the Fifth Circuit with judges, the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, with judges who got death threats during the Civil Rights Movement, judges like William Wayne Justice, district judge who had people shot rifles through the windows of his house in Tyler. He said, I really haven't done anything. But he said, I want you to promise, in the words of Churchill, never give up, never give up, never give up. And he died a month later. And the award that our section has is named after him. And I think it's really important that when you're tired, when you're mad, when people have been mean to you, when people ignore you, which may be the most rude thing that they can do, and just basically say, you're not worth my attention, and you want to quit, somewhere there needs to be a place of strength that you can go back to, and you can decide, I'm not going to quit. I may be upset, but I'm not going to quit. I'm going to think about this and process it, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to win. I'm going to do what I have to do to win, play within the rules, but I'm going to do what I have to do to win. And that certainly would be the message that I have for anyone who's an activist today. I can't speak to the reality of being 20 or 30 today. I have an 18-year-old, and so I'm not completely oblivious. And I've been a scoutmaster of a troop, including my son. Incidentally, it's terrible when you're the primary leader of your kid's youth group. That's an awful experience, both for your kid and for you. He was the senior patrol leader for any of you who are scout people, and we had to go do summer camp together, and that was uncomfortable, but we did it. But I think it's also important that you find groups outside of whatever activism or politics that you want to do, where you can engage with people as people, whether it be scouts, civic association, that's pretty political actually. Some kind of house of worship, if that's your flavor, where you can actually hang out with people that you like and you don't have to be the judge, the mayor, any of that stuff. And you can just be one of the members of the group. You know, you can be a scout leader, and nobody, trust me, nobody pays any attention to what job you have during the day in those functions. And that's great. It's great to have other ways to relate to people besides going back to what I said at the beginning, whatever your role is. And the judge role is tough because as much as some people think that there's nothing I won't say, and I've had people say, there seems to be nothing that you won't actually say. And I'm thinking to myself, you have no idea what I'm thinking, what I haven't said. In the judiciary, I say almost nothing because I'm not supposed to. And I am indebted to Mayor Parker for starting me off on that. Probably one of the things that super upset some of the people in the first Court of Appeals where I was a staff attorney is when I became a judge. None of them said congratulations. One of the members of the 14th Court of Appeals said congratulations, Mayor. And she's now in the Texas Supreme Court, and I have reminded her that she told me congratulations and thought it was wonderful that I was a judge. I'll leave with I could tell Judge Frye stories, but Phyllis can do this better than I can. I'll leave with a story about the mayor. The night she won, I was at the room at the Hilton Americas amongst the group of people there. And she was waiting for, was it the 6 p.m. news deadline? So she was going to be live at 6. And the room, or maybe it was 10, I forget what it was. It was probably 10 o'clock. So the results wouldn't have been back before then. Yeah. And so everybody was waiting and everybody was waiting and everybody was waiting. And she got on the TV. And candidly, I've never thought Mayor Parker has the comedic timing to where she could do stand up. But she said, I'm so proud to be the first mayor of the city of Houston, and then pause, who's a graduate of Rice University. It was brilliant and it brought down the house. So I thank you for being a role model. I thank Judge Frye for being a role model. And neither of these two women is used to seeing me be emotional. At least I hope not. But it is a privilege to be on the stage with you. And I love my job as a judge. Some of the things that I deal with are bone-crushingly mundane. And you have to stay on task and do your work because it's not enough that you're gay. It's not enough that you're queer. It's not enough that you're the first. You really have to go do your job. If you suck at your job, then you shouldn't have run for it. And so in all of that, winning is great. Having the job is great. Showing up every day and doing the work. Some days it's not fun. Some days it is. And you need to do that. Okay.
So does that mean you're over?
You're on, Judge Frye. Thank you, Justice Spade. Yes, Judge Frye, you're on now.
Well, usually whenever somebody speaks, they thank the people that they're on the panel with, yada, yada, yada. But y'all who are listening need to know that I've known and worked with these two people for decades. And I love them both immensely. And so it is an honor to be on the panel with both of you. Y'all are just fantastic people. You really are. I've got 20 minutes like they did. I've got a long story. So I'm going to give you some stuff to do for homework. It'll go a lot faster. If you will simply Google my name, Phyllis, Phyllis, Frye. If you will simply Google my name, you will find the 2015 article in the New York Times. It'll be electronic. You won't know that the paper copy came out on Sunday. It was a Sunday edition of the New York Times. On the front page of that Sunday edition, above the fold of that Sunday edition, it really freaked me out. But you'll find that article. It's long. It's got a lot of pictures. If you'll scroll down, you'll find other things that have been published about me. You'll find the Wikipedia page. You will find the link to the digital Frye collection, which is housed as an archive at Texas A&M University. And if you go down several more, don't stop. Please don't stop, because after about 10 or so, you're going to see Trish Frye, Trish Frye. Trish was my wife for 48 years. There is no way in the world I could have accomplished all that I did accomplish to the degree that I accomplished without her. I lost her 6 months ago. And so I'm still grieving over that. But I want you to read that article, and underneath that article, you'll also see her obituary. She was the bravest person I've ever known. And just to give you a flavor, she met me in 1972. In 1972, she's 5 years older. She'd been out of college for 7 years, school teacher, making her own money. She'd been at Monterrey, Mexico, teaching at an American school there for 2 years, and she drove a Mustang. Now, that may not mean much to you now, but in 1972, a woman who was 29 years old, single, good looking, driving a Mustang, she was a hot mama. She really was. And I don't know what she saw in me at the beginning, because I'd just come back from Germany. I'd been divorced from my first marriage. The military, I'm a military officer. They learned that I had a propensity towards wanting to cross-dress. That's how I was dealing with the fact that I wanted to be a woman then, because I didn't know much about what was going on. And so they got busy trying to run me out, and I fought with them for 8 months to get an honorable discharge. So I came back to the States, and I met Trish, and I had this wrist in stitches, and I was a mess. I really was. But, and Trish was dating, and her mother didn't marry until she was 35. And she had an aunt who had never married. There was no pressure for her to marry. But there was something that she saw in me, and I've thought about it a lot since she passed. What was it that she saw in me? And I think what she saw in me is that I didn't give her any BS. I was screwed up. I knew I was screwed up, and I was honest about being screwed up. And I told her what all was going on, and she listened. And over a couple of months of us dating off and on, we became very good friends. And she finally said, you know, I really don't understand this, but you're a nice person, and I will remain your friend. And so after a couple of months, we fell in love. And after a couple of months, we became lovers. And after a couple more months, I was working at Texas A&M at the time. They found out about who I wanted to be, and so they fired me. And she said, and I got a job in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And she said, you know, if this is the only thing that's wrong with you, I think that you're a very valuable person. And I love you very much. And if you'll come back at the end of the school year, I'll marry you. And so she did. And we lived in Pittsburgh for a couple of years. And then I got fired again for the same damn reason. And so we came down to Houston, where I had a job, which I got fired from again for the same damn reason. But we were together for 3 years. I grew hair on my face. I tried desperately to be a guy, and it just wasn't working. And so the summer of '76, you've heard the stories about setting a bird free. If you really love something, you'll set it free. And she really loved me. And she said, you are going crazy. I will, if you need to be Phyllis, you're going to have to be Phyllis. And if you will stop just short of surgery, I'll see if I can hang on. Well, you know, that was an interesting decision for me, because she was going to let me be Phyllis. She was going to let me change my legal name. She was going to let me take hormones. She was going to let me grow breasts and a tushy, which is a female buttocks, which I was not expecting and was thoroughly pleased with. And she was going to let me do all of this and keep her love. And all I had to do was stop short of surgery. Well, that was a real deal. So I transitioned and we stayed together for another 22 years. During that period of time, from 1976 to 1986, I went to law school. All 3 years, I fought bitterly with the Christian Legal Society. I usually put a 2-syllable adjective in front of them, but I know it's going to be recorded, so I won't. There was a law in the city of Houston that made cross-dressing an arrestable offense. So during that time, before I went to law school and while I was in law school, I lobbied city council to repeal that ordinance, which after 4 years they finally did. We were so desperately poor because I couldn't earn income, both before law school and after law school. None of the firms would hire me. None of the very few gay firms would hire me. There weren't any out lesbian firms. And so I made money by selling cleaning products to the gay bars. And I remember one Christmas, we were so desperately poor that our church brought us the boxed and bagged canned food that had been left at the altar for the poor family. That was us. For 10 summers, to save money, we did not run our air conditioner because that saved money for electricity. Right now, I'm very excited about the fact that my biography is going to be published in the spring of next year. It's going to be called Her Honor. At least that's the current title. And the publisher is going through their last minute stuff and have put it on the calendar for next spring. What excites me the most about the book is so many people have told me, Phyllis, you should write your story. And I've always replied to them the same way. If I have to write my story, then it's just another, oh gee, isn't Phyllis Frye great? If someone else writes the story, that's different. And 2 authors, Michael Long and Shay Tuttle, you can Google them both, are established authors, and they've spent the last 3 years of their professional lives researching my archives interviewing me, talking to people. Mayor Parker's in the book. And they've invested their time for my biography. Every time I read the manuscript, I've read the fourth manuscript now. The period of time from 1976 to 1986, I have a tough time getting through, because those 10 years, this is going to be recorded, okay, were terrible. They were terrible. Oh my gosh, they were terrible. The neighbors, you know, one of the reasons why I went to law school was so that I could get the GI Bill and earn money by going to school. And I went to law school primarily so that when I became a lawyer, I would scare the hell out of the neighbors and they might leave us alone. And me becoming a lawyer did scare the hell out of the neighbors, and they did finally leave us alone. But, you know, when Halloween came around, we did not turn on our porch light, because we just knew that if a kid got poisoned, they were going to come to us first with a search warrant. And every time, the morning after Thanksgiving, Trish would go out and do the perimeter of the backyard to see if the kids had left poison. Our house was egged numerous times. Our tires were slashed. We got obscene phone calls for many years. And interestingly, you might find this interesting, I did. They were always on Christmas and Easter. That's when we got the obscene phone call. Trish put up with all of that because, number one, it made her mad. And number two, as she's told people time and time again, including her parents and sister who wanted her to leave me, Phyllis has done nothing wrong. The only thing she's done is try to be true to herself. And I took a marriage vow, and I'm going to stay true to Phyllis. And as Trish has told many people, the pressure that we were on either jams you together or it rips you apart. Well, it jammed us together. But as you read Trish's story, and I beg you to, and as you read her obituary, you will get an idea of what a truly brave person is. She was scared to death of losing her teaching job. At that time, where she taught was a rural school district in a suburb of Houston. And she was terrified that they would find out about me. She taught music in the public schools to elementary school kids for 35 years. And when she retired, she hated retirement, and she found a job teaching in a church school to preschool kids. And she taught for another 17 years. And on her gravestone, it's inscribed, for 52 years, Trish taught music to thousands of young children, and for 48 years, she was Phyllis's best friend and wife. And that's the kind of person I've spent the last 48 years with, and I hope you take the time to read about her. Now, they want us to touch on some other areas, which I'm going to. I've got 5 minutes left. I'm the agitator. I'm the one who would get into good trouble. I'm the one who in 1989 was fed up with the fact that the lesbian and gay community, both locally, regionally, and nationally, would not have a damn thing to do with the transgender community. They saw us as not part of them, even though we like to say that we threw the first high-heeled shoes at Stonewall. You know, there may be people that threw the first stones at Stonewall, but we threw the first high heels, and we were there. Anyway, so I started fighting on the local and then national scene, and in 1991, I formed the International Conference for Transgender Law and Employment Policy, and we had 6 annual conferences here in Houston on transgender law, and we published 5 bound proceedings. Everything that we did was transcribed by court reporters. And I know because Michael Long and Shay Tuttle in their writing of my book have footnoted the heck out of the proceedings, and I know because Shannon Minter, who was a trans man with the National Center for Lesbian Rights, NCLR, and who's argued many times before the United States Supreme Court, has written the foreword to my biography. And he says, without a doubt, that the Bostic decision that came out last June, which said that Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, based on employment discrimination on sex, includes both sexual orientation and gender identity. As Shannon wrote, and as I know in my heart, if it hadn't been for those conferences and all the people that I trained and all the people that they have since trained, Bostic would have been sexual orientation only. It would not have been inclusive. We waged and I led it, a 19-year fight against the lesbian and gay community and against the Human Rights Campaign until finally in 2008, all of the national and regional organizations, Congressmember Barney Frank, who was one of our adversaries, and the Human Rights Campaign all said the same thing. Trans is part of the community. And so now we are one, and now we are the LGBTQI United Community. I do a lot of these panels, and I make sure, I look at the background of people who are on Zoom. And if you'll notice, there's Dustin Hoffman as Tootsie. And that movie, when it came out, meant a lot to me. And there's Felicity Huffman in Trans America. She's standing there trying to decide which restroom to use. I can't tell you how many decades we have fought so that we can pee behind a stall door. Just amazing. Just amazing. I remember when the Texas legislature, not this session, but last session, was trying to pass a restroom law. And our police chief then, he's recently moved to a better job, named Art Acevedo. I said, Art, I need your cell phone number because if this law passes, when it becomes effective in August, I'm going to be the first one arrested for a trial for a test case. And I would like for you to be there to arrest me so that I'm not injured when I get hauled off to jail for booking. And he smiled and he says, Judge Frye, I'd be glad to. In fact, I'll make sure my handcuffs are polished for the event. So it's been an interesting life. I am very excited about the life I've led and the 2 wonderful people on this panel that I've come to know and love very deeply. So my 20 minutes are up. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for sharing your stories. That was tremendous. It was moving. It was inspiring, insightful, funny. All I mean, I really thank you all for sharing and giving us so much. Let me now, we have some questions coming in. Let me invite the participants all out there to ask questions. I want to start just with one, a general one. Justice Spain, I think you can weigh in this, but if you can't, you can decline. But I would just be interested to hear your comments on where you all feel we are today with LGBTQ rights and the movement. Seems in some ways like we're moving in two different directions. I mean, there's been so much progress, and there's so many signs and reasons to be optimistic, and then then I open the newspaper and there are reasons to be pessimistic. And I just wonder what your thoughts are about that.
Was that for me first?
It's for, yeah, you can, if you feel comfortable, you can, and then anyone, yeah.
I'll tell you where my pulse is on the community. My son's Scout troop is at Palmer Church across from Rice and Herman Park. It's very diverse, ethnically, socioeconomically, economically. I will tell you that the kids don't care. And so one of the things that I'm happy about is stuff that used to freak me out. It's just a yawn. And Judge Frye gave the Eagle charge to my son. She had her Eagle badge pinned on at his Eagle Scout Court of Honor. And I'm sure there were people that were there at the church it was a big show. I'm sure there were people who were uncomfortable with it, but nobody said anything. In fact, everybody said it was lovely. So in many respects, I think there's been the younger kids out there don't care nearly as much about this. So that's great. Are there still problems? Absolutely. I mean, it still comes up in ways that we can't get the Texas legislature to repeal the homosexual conduct statute, which was declared void by the United States Supreme Court in 2007. And we're now 11 or 12 sessions of the legislature later, and they won't do it. And, you can figure out the politics of that. So I don't, it's both hopeful and, I am very pessimistic on some days.
Mayor Parker, Judge Frye, would you like to weigh in on that, or should we move to?
So I'm absolutely hopeful, but I'm going to say a couple of things. One is that I agree with Justice Spain. Young people don't care in a way. When the teens today, move out into the world of work, this conversation is already passé for them. The idea of gender distinctions, and I find it, as someone who's been in the movement for decades, I find it hard to keep up still with young people. But at the same time, there's still kids sleeping on the street because their families have cast them out. There was a teenage boy on my couch last October because he, his parents told him he couldn't come home till he wasn't queer anymore. There are active, both psychological and legal and physical assaults being directed, particularly at trans women across America. And so it is infinitely better than it was, and it gets better every day. And it's amazing to see the how young people view these issues of sexual orientation and gender identity and are so comfortable with it. But at the same time, the world can be a scary place if you're in the wrong place, in the wrong family, at the wrong time.
I'm very optimistic. We just survived 4 horrendous years led by that orange thing and his ilk. And they were assaults. They were definite assaults. And some of that is still going on in state legislatures, including Texas's legislature. But we survived it. And I know, it would have been very easy for the Democratic Party to throw us under the bus politically. And they never, ever, ever wavered. And so I'm excited about more transgender people getting elected. And, you know, it's funny, when Mayor Parker made me a judge, I remember I was getting phone calls from producers of local radio and television shows because they wanted to interview me with one of these clucks, one of these religious nuts who wanted to say that I was part of Mayor Parker's gay agenda. And I told the producers the same thing, every one of them the same thing. I am a felony trial attorney. I have tried felony trials for 35 years. This is traffic court. You don't think I can hear a ticket? And no, I'm not going to give these people a microphone. And so I never did. Where I live in a senior center. It's a good one. Very nice people with the exception of one person. And when Trish and I came here, we outed ourselves from the day one, not only as a lesbian couple, but as me being a transgender person. And they don't care. You know, they just don't care. And right now, I've pretty much told everybody that in 58 days, I'm finally going to have my genital surgery, and they're all supportive. So what do? I'm excited about the future. Now, there's some things that need to be worked on. Elder care, if we have time before this is over with. I would love to talk about elder care of transgender elders. But I'm very optimistic about the future.
Good, thank you. So we've got a bunch of questions coming in. Let me start with this first one. In your experience, what approaches worked the best to get allies in wait? Oh, I'm sorry, this is from Austin Butts. What approaches worked the best to get allies in wait to become full allies? Allies in wait here being those who do not have the exposure needed to be mindful of LGBTQ plus issues, but who care for LGBTQ plus people and who have their hearts in the right place.
Come out of the closet.
Okay. A lot of people want to be allies and they just don't know how or where. So we have I'll take the responsibility. We have to tell them, this is where you need to show up. You need to fight against this bill. You need to be supportive here and there. And it's not, and when Phyllis said, just show up, it's important to handle the little things too. You know, someone makes a snide comment about somebody else who might be trans or might be gay. It's important to speak up, but they have to do it. There's no one going to be there telling them to do it. So it's the small personal things, but also it's the public things. And for a lot of folks, it's just, they need the nudge. They don't need to be hit over the head. They just need the nudge and they'll do the right thing.
I think it's terribly important to be whoever you are. I've long said that my parents and my older sister, even though I begrudge giving her credit for anything, helped make me the person that I am. But besides that, the Southern Baptists and the Boy Scouts of America made me who I am. And I want to pay both of those groups back. I think you need to be real with the people that you're around. And I wouldn't say that I was raised in an evangelical Southern Baptist church, River Oaks Baptist Church, just spoiler alert, but I would say that I'm comfortable going and talking to people in ways that I was terrified to do before. And if you go and be real with people, I mean, they may just walk away, but you also may make a real human connection with them. And that's where the conversations start, in my opinion. I think you just have to be you and be nice.
You know, but that's dealing with folks who aren't allies. And I'm going to say that the reason that I'm still in the fight 45 years later is that I'm not angry. I don't have a chip on my shoulder. If you don't like me, doesn't matter to me. I'm going to go around you. If you try to block my path, I'll find another path. I can spend a lot of time being angry and frustrated, or I could figure out a way forward. And it's just constant forward motion.
So here's another question, loosely related. As members of the LGBT community, in my experience, unless you work in an openly LGBT office, it can sometimes be hard to feel comfortable coming out to coworkers for fear of someone finding other reasons, in quotes, to fire you. What policy would you suggest, or how would you fight this de facto sort of discrimination in the workplace? Maybe I'll go to Judge Frye first with that, since
since I got fired so often. When Bostic came out in 1976, when I came out and I got fired the last time, I did file an EEOC complaint, and it took a while for it to process through. And the EEOC did, in fact, rule that I had been discriminated against. Problem was, the first federal appellate decision came out a few months before that said that sex did not include transgender. And then there were two others several years later, and that was the way the law was. Well, on the morning that Bostic came out, Trish and I, oh, I'm sorry, folks, my dogs. Trish and I, shut up. Trish and I were at the hospital getting one of her treatments, and we were watching the television, and they started talking about Bostic. And I looked at Trish and I said, 46 years. It took 46 years from the time I filed that first complaint, and they can't fire me anymore. And then we talked about it, and I looked at her and I said, as a school teacher who was afraid of losing her job all those decades, they can't fire you anymore either. The day Bostic came out, even though we were sitting in the hospital and she was plugged into chemotherapy, we really celebrated. It was a feeling of freedom that after 46 years, neither she nor I could ever be fired again. I would suggest that if you want to come out, you get a job with a firm that has enough employees so that if they fire you, you can go to EEOC.
And I'm gonna say that the 20 years I was in the oil industry, I was a community activist the whole time. And for a long time, I thought I could have like two lives. I could go to work and not talk about the things I did in my free time, which is almost as much as I did at work. And then I could keep the two separate. But at some point in 91, when I first ran for office, I'd come to the conclusion that I had to completely integrate both sides of my life if I was going to be happy, and I would just deal with the consequences. The most powerful thing that has changed the world for the LGBT community is not, I've done a lot as an activist. Phyllis has, Justice Spain. The most powerful thing is individuals coming out, not politicians. It's individuals making that decision for themselves. You need to take that step. And when you're ready, come out, and you too are going to be part of changing and shaping the future. But it's too much of a psychological burden to hide. And there's no job that's worth it.
I went to Chief Justice Alice Oliver Parrott at the First Court of Appeals and asked for permission to be on the board of the Stonewall Law Association for Greater Houston. And the chief looked at me and she said, "Are you a real bar association? Do you have real lawyers? Do you do CLE? Do you do all this kind of stuff?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Get out of my office. Stop asking for permission." And I think she's a wonderful person. And it was the last time I ever asked anybody for permission. And when you stop asking for permission, they can still fire you, but you seize a whole lot of personal power that you didn't know that you had. And I was later told that when I got married and sent out wedding announcements to everybody on the court, I terrified many of them. When I sent out a birth announcement for my son, they were terrified. When I became a judge, they were worried. And it was the former chief of police of the city of Houston, who was a judge on the court, Sam Nucci, who told me, "You have no idea how much power you have, Mr. Spain. I mean, just use it, move on." So I think you kind of have to own it. And if they do fire you, maybe you're working at the wrong place.
Amen.
Thank you. So boy, we've got a whole slew of questions here in the chat. I don't know if you are looking at them. Maybe I'll read out a couple, and you can, if there's one specifically you want to address that you see there, you should read it out and you can answer it.
Someone asked for me about the hero ordinance. What would I do differently? I would have started sooner, so I had another bite at the apple. I had other priorities. I didn't have a gay agenda for the city of Houston. I had the city's agenda, and I said from the moment I started running that when I worked my way through my to-do list, we were going to deal with LGBT rights in Houston, and happened to be my third term, and it is something that really irks me that the city that elected me 9 times and is also the city that 4 times in my adult life, my neighbors have had the opportunity to vote on my civil rights. 4 times. And every time they voted that I did not have equal civil rights.
Mm-hmm.
I would have done it earlier so I could come right back at them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to say something on elder care before we run out of time.
Please.
Yeah, please.
What most people don't understand is that most transgender people, be they trans men or trans women, cannot afford, or they have health issues or whatever, they cannot afford to get the full and complete surgical affirming changes. And so when they go into hospitals for who knows what, or they go to nursing homes, they are seen as one gender at the top of the sheet. But when people go to deal with catheters and diapers and bed sore turning and all that other stuff, they see something else. And my experience in the hospital 20 years ago, I had some problems, was that there was always at least one person a day who did not belong on that floor, but who came up there to tell me about their Bible and to preach to me about how I could be saved. And they were always using the wrong pronouns. And if you're stuck there and all you get is Bible thumping and people who refuse to give you the dignity of the pronouns that you have fought all of your life to have, a lot of people won't go to nursing homes and will find ways to end it. And so until that situation gets fixed, that's what's going to happen. Because that was one of the reasons why in 1995, my wife told me that if I wanted to have surgery, she would stay with me. Because I just told her, I said, if you die before I do, I'm going to stock up on sleeping pills, because there's no way I'm going into a nursing home. So that's something, gang, y'all need to deal with. Okay? That's all the preaching you're going to get from me on that subject. You'll get preaching on other subjects, but that subject.
No, thank you. That's a hugely important issue that you raised. So thank you for that. Boy, we only have a couple more minutes. Geez, I don't know what to do, but how about what would you like to see changed in public education at the K through 12 or in higher education to strive for equality?
Not really. I don't know if it's our in our wheelhouse. But what would make a tremendous difference is the ability to have affirming organizations on campuses. Not necessarily what's taught in the classroom, but the ability for students to have, access to counts, access to gay straight alliances, access to support networks, because it's still a scary world out there for a lot of LGBTQ teens, particularly.
Yeah, sure.
I've been hired over the past 20 years by parents of young children who are transitioning in their schools, or their school district, or the school superintendent says, no way, you're going to use the other restroom. We're not going to change your name. We're not going to call you who you want to be called. And they hire me, and I go through court, and I get a court order that tells the school district, this is their name, this is their legal gender, and you will behave yourself. That's what I do. As an attorney, not as a judge.
Well, we're coming to an end. There is a question here about, it says, opportunities to work for new social workers to work at your respective organizations. I think that would probably be primarily for you, Mayor Parker, but others, I'm not sure if you have suggestions also, other organizations, but if you had resources or opportunities that you wanted to send me, I could post them after the talk on our webpage, and with a copy of this discussion for people to go to. That I think that might be a nice way to follow up this great discussion we've had with some resources that people can then go to. So if you have anything like that you would,
I would hope folks would victoryfund.org, victoryinstitute.org, Out for America. If you Google Out for America, it's the list of every known LGBT elected official currently serving in the United States. So it's a cool resource. And yes, we're not a policy organization, but there's definitely ways that you can plug in. So thanks.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. We are at 7 o'clock. There's still this whole long slew of questions. So, maybe at some point we can bring you all back, and especially once we can get in, we can be in person, and we can have a more free flowing discussion, because your stories, your messages are all hugely important and inspirational, and there's a lot of interest and I think positive energy about all this, and people want to get involved and know what more they can do, and understand the past and look to the future. So you've provided to us with I think a tremendous panel tonight talking about all these things. William, do you want to jump in with a final word?
Everybody else that came out and looked at this, and I see a ton of really awesome questions in the chat here. Another thing I wanted to ask is, I know that it can be really tough juggling personal and work lives and that kind of stuff, but I see a lot of questions in the chat from some really dedicated individuals. If y'all would be willing to, or you have email addresses that you give to people to ask those kinds of questions. I know we've got a lot of folks that would really, really love to get your opinions on things. If you'd be willing to put something like that in the resources that you give to us, I know that folks would love to engage with you on those issues if that's something you're interested in. But other than that, I wanted to thank all of you for giving your time and coming out. This was really, truly amazing. So thank you so much.
And I want y'all to see this, because I want to thank William. So after the Boy Scouts, after the Boy Scouts in 2013 voted to allow queer scouts to be in, William wanted to be in the Pride Parade. And so I, hooked him up with these two strange women. And he and his dad and I were on the first float in the parade. And I would never have gotten on that first float before. If you've never been on it, it's the Pride float, and there's nobody in front of you, and you have to throw beads out at everyone, and it's the most physical work that you can possibly imagine, because the crowd is voracious. So, Liam, but for you doing that and me being there, I never would have gotten on that float. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all. This was really wonderful. Again, thank you. Appreciate it. Also to all the participants out there, thank you. The conversation will continue. So have a good night, everyone. To my class out there, students, we'll meet up in our separate link in 10 minutes. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, all.
Are we off?
No, I think we're still on, so I've got to end the meeting. I'm sorry.
Well, I enjoyed it. I'll see you again.
Okay, yeah.
I would love to have you back at some point for sure.
Okay. You know where I am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right, see you in a minute, Dan.